To those who are not familiar with our work, let me say at once that what we are about to do is not positive thinking, not self-hypnosis, not a bright new slogan to repeat 10 times before breakfast. Please let us be clear about that. Our way is the oldest way and the simplest. A short, practical turning within before conversation begins. Before our classes, before our ministry, before our treatments, we come to the stillness. Meditation is the real secret behind all of the work that we do, because in that stillness, we consent to a presence that is not manufactured by mind, not built out of words, not supported by effort. Now the day has a threshold. It is more decisive than our schedule and more powerful than our plans. It is the instant before we speak. Before the first word to spouse or child, to coworker or stranger, to the one at the end of a telephone or across a table, there is a moment of government. In that moment, we either bow to appearances, histories, roles, moods, or we yield to I am. The whole day will be the effect of that consent. Please let us see it in this wise. Anything in the external world is in effect. The presence and power of cause is within you, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. By I am, I do not mean a phrase to be said with the lips. Reading I am or saying I am is far from experiencing I am. The secret is yielding until the word becomes a living impartation within, until it speaks in us. Be still and know that I am God. Not know that I am thinking about God, but know God. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Therefore, before we speak, before we answer, before we defend, we must let I am be the only presence we consent to. This is not a posture of passivity. It is the true activity, the silence that lets the inner government announce itself. Out here, the world is constantly assigning us parts. Victim or warrior, employee or boss, problem solver or problem, offender or the afraid one. These are effects, not identity. In the human scene, we begin as the acted upon. In spiritual life, we begin as cause. In proportion as we return to our spiritual identity before the tongue is loosed, in that proportion, our words change character. The tongue reveals consciousness. Harmony follows cause. In our time together, we are going to make this very practical. We will learn the exact 3-minute stillness, minute by minute. We will see why it works, what blocks it, how to meet dryness, noise, and the absence of any feeling. We will watch how, in proportion to that inward contact, reactions soften, conflicts lose oxygen, fear forgets its lines, and even the words that come out of our mouths are different, gentler, truer, governed. Do not be disturbed if this sounds small. A seed is small. A breath is small. 3 minutes rightly given open the day to the kingdom within. Let us begin here, before any word, consenting to presence, and let the day be the effect. Now we must face an almost frightening fact. And please let us be clear about it. As human beings, left to ourselves, our conversation is not under the government of God. The tongue, unguided by inward silence, draws on memory, on yesterday's hurt, on ambition, on anxiety, on the need to be right, on the urge to be safe. It answers to the climate of the human mind, reactive, defended, planning its survival. This is not a condemnation, it is a diagnosis. Effects follow causes. If our cause is the human sense of life, the day will unfailingly show the human sense as effect. Watch how quickly the world assigns us an identity through our words. One comment, half-formed, and we become the anxious one. One sharp reply, and we are the angry one. One careful hedging, and we are the weak one. One insistence on winning an argument, and we are the one who must win. In a moment, the label is fixed, not only in another's thought, but worse, in our own. We begin to live inside the costume our lips have sewn. We speak again from that role, and the role answers through us as if it were our life. This is how bondage is perpetuated, by consenting to an identity fashioned out of reaction and then letting that identity do our speaking. Let us see it in this wise. Arguments, misunderstandings, overtalking, and the headlines of our private wars are not causes. These are effects. The unseen cause is the state of consciousness we bring into the room. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. The room hears our heart long before it hears our sentences. A humanly troubled conscience clouds the air, and then we blame the weather for the storm that breaks. But the storm was sown in the pressure inside us. Conversely, a quieted heart, just quieted, begins to govern the atmosphere. Not by will, not by phrases, but by presence. In proportion as we begin the day from inner contact, in that proportion do frictions lessen. In proportion as we yield those 3 minutes before speaking, in that proportion do overreactions subside and regrets fail to find us. In proportion as we abide, even lightly, the tone shifts. The same words may be used, but they are not the same words, for they are not carrying the same life. And in proportion as we neglect this, as we hurry past the inner altar and rush to speak, we reap exactly what we have sown. More heat than light, more noise than guidance, more defense than truth. Therefore, the first work is not to edit our speech. The first work is to return to source before speech begins. The tongue does not need schooling, so much as the heart needs stilling. Attempting to manage words without changing the cause is like mopping the floor while the faucet runs. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. If that is true, and it is true, then our safety lies not in the cleverness of our sentences, but in the consent that allows I am to be the government within us. When that is the order, cause first, effect afterward, the day begins to tell a different story. We shall practice this. We shall stop, consent, and then speak. And you will find that the moment you cease to be the speaker and become the listener within, the words that follow come from a different country and carry a different weather. Now, if we are to stop, consent, and then speak, we must be very clear to whom or to what we are consenting. I am is not a banner for the ego to wave. It is not a bit of superiority, not a magical formula, not a new label to paste over an old self. Please let us be clear about that. Saying I am with the lips will not make God present. God is already present. I am names the fact of being, the divine presence that is the life of you and of me, the isness at the center, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. It is not mental affirmation, it is recognition. It is not performance, it is presence. Reading about this will leave us exactly where all reading leaves us. Enriched, perhaps informed, but still outside the gate until the word becomes an experience within. Hearing about God is not the secret of life. Talking about truth is not the secret of life. These are steps, good steps, but they leave us, how shall I say it, halfway to heaven. Only when the hush descends within, only when something announces itself in us beyond thought, does the journey become life. God must become to us an experience. All power is in the word, but not the word that goes out from our mouth. The power is the word that comes to us within. Impartation, not recitation. Revelation, not rhetoric. When a single impartation of truth stirs in the sanctuary of our own being, it does the work that our finest phrases cannot do. It protects, it governs, it supplies, it directs. Until then, our right thinking is still our thinking. That is not salvation. Listen to the Master's own stance. I can of mine own self do nothing. John 5:30. That is not self-belittlement. It is spiritual truth. And again, the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. There is the pattern. The Christ within, call it I am, call it the Word, acts. Our part is to yield. Our part is to become quiet enough, receptive enough, that the works may be of God and not of us. Therefore, the aim of our 3 minutes is not to manufacture peace, not to brace up our courage, not to compose a better sentence. The aim is to stop managing life with the mind and to consent to be governed. We turn within in an attitude of expectancy, not asking for things, not arranging outcomes, but awaiting the inner government. If you feel a subtle shift from pushing to resting, from self-urge to inner poise, that is enough. In proportion as that shift is real, in that proportion will your words later be clothed with a life that is not personal. You may not feel anything. Do not let that disturb you. Stillness is not measured by sensation, but by surrender. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10 is not an order to feel. It is an invitation to know. And the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21 is not a promise of a future country. It is the location of cause now. So we sit, 3 minutes, yielded, and let the word within be first. Then, and only then, does speech become effect. Why before we speak? Because the order of life is always inner first and outer afterward. Let us see it plainly. First, consciousness. Then the tone it radiates. Then the words it clothes. Then the consequences that follow. Cause, atmosphere, expression, effect. We do not alter the chain by polishing the last link. We alter it only at the headwaters, consciousness, where the stream takes its character. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. The mouth does not invent, it reveals. It reveals what we have consented to be our life for this moment. This is why the human attempt to manage outcomes through clever speech so often fails. We try to sound agreeable so we will be liked. We craft careful phrases so we will win. We hedge the truth so we will avoid conflict. And in every move the personal sense tightens. Fear of losing face, anxiety about the other's reaction, the inner posture of defense. And then what? The tongue, drawing from that defended well, carries the very vibration we hope to hide. The other may not catch the logic, but they always catch the life in it. Please let us be clear about that. The life in the word is the life of the consciousness from which it came. Consider the familiar scenes. The email reply typed too fast, no pause, no inward return, goes out sharp. and now we must send a second message to repair the first. The defensive answer to a spouse, offered from the urge to survive rather than the willingness to listen, multiplies sentences and subtracts trust. The impulsive comment to a child, born of our weariness rather than their need, stains an hour we later wish to recover. These are not linguistic failures. These are fruits of an unreturned identity, moments in which we began as effect, not cause. Here is the paradox that will set you free. The more you attempt to control conversation as effect, the less harmonious it becomes. The instant you surrender personal control and turn within, harmony appears of itself. I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father within me, He doeth the works. And again, James tells us, the tongue can no man tame. Please take that literally. You cannot tame effect, but the Spirit within governs cause. And when cause is God-governed, effect follows. A soft answer that turns away wrath is not a technique. It is the sound a governed heart makes. Therefore, we must do it before we speak. Not after the quarrel, to mop up the floor while the faucet still runs, but before the first drop falls. We adopt a sacred pause, a 3-minute consent in which we refuse to begin the day from the outer realm, not from emails waiting, not from moods swirling, not from yesterday's wins or wounds, but from I am. In that pause, we are not arranging our sentences. We are yielding our source. In proportion as we return there, in that proportion the tongue, without training, finds itself saying only what love would say, and leaving unsaid all that fear would have shouted. Now to make this practical. What we are about to do is a miniature meditation. Listening, not thinking. Receptivity, not affirmation. Expectancy, not effort. Please let us be clear about that. We are not going to prepare words. We are going to yield to the Word. All power is in the Word, and the Word is within you. Preparation, 10 or 20 seconds only. Sit or stand where you are. If you are in a chair, let the feet find the floor. If you are at a desk, let the hands come to rest. Soften the gaze or close the eyes. Let the body be unimportant. Withdraw faith from posture and breathing and place it within. And quietly, without strain, acknowledge, I can of my own self do nothing. Let that be your first act of truth-telling. Father within, thy turn. Minute 1. Withdrawal from the outer realm. Consciously let go of names, roles, schedules, grievances. Lay them down, one by one, as you would set down packages you have been carrying too long. Not denying them, simply refusing to take them as identity. Not the parent now, not the manager now, not the offended one, not the fixer. Let today's assignments be merely assignments. Refuse to wear them as self. Return to the simple fact of being. I am. Not, I am this or that. Just, I am. Closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, there is life being life. Rest there. No describing, no improving. Just the fact of being. Minute 2. Consent to presence. Now, without repeating, rest upon I am. Let I am become recognition rather than statement, a holy noticing rather than a phrase. Sink into a listening attitude. Elijah found it not in wind, not in earthquake, not in fire, but in a still, small voice. 1 Kings 19:12. Listen for that, not with ears, not with imagination, but with readiness. Do not construct words. Do not reach for a feeling. Do not try to believe. Be still and know. If a breath deepens, let it. If thoughts float by, let them float. You are not their shepherd. Your entire consent is this: Father, govern. Presence, be thyself. I relinquish the management of life to the life that is. Minute 3. Abiding and sealing. Remain in quiet expectancy, as if a letter is being slipped under the door. If a word arises inwardly, peace, be still, fear not, my presence. Receive it, not as a thought you made, but as impartation. Let it touch you without your help. If nothing arises, remain satisfied in stillness. Silence is a word in God. Abide until the restfulness itself becomes your assurance. In proportion as you truly abide, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute, in that proportion, the seal is set upon the day. Closing. 10 or 15 seconds only. Gently open the eyes. Do not rush to speak. Carry the quiet into the first conversation. Let the first word come out of the stillness rather than out of the old momentum. If circumstances press, let them press against a governed heart. Guard this practice from misuse. This is not the time to rehearse arguments, not the time to visualize outcomes, not the time to treat a person or a condition. Our turning is to God as cause. When the 3 minutes have stopped using mind to manage life and begun to abide quietly in I am, the work is done. Then speech, conflict, and fear will tell the story of the government you have consented to. Cause first, effect afterward. Now, as soon as you begin to practice, expect the mind to stage its parade. Unfinished tasks will step forward with banners. Email, bills, that conversation you dread. Old resentments will file past with their speeches prepared. Body sensations will demand attention. Fear will shout, "This is not working," and impatience will add, "You do not have time." Please let us be clear about this. Such noise is not a sign that stillness is impossible. It is a sign that personal sense has been dethroned and is trying to reclaim the seat. Do not argue with a dethroned claimant. Do not negotiate with it. Let it perform its little drama without your consent, and quietly, inwardly, return. It may not come quickly. Do not let that disturb you. Hearing about God and reading about God has trained us to expect fireworks. Experience begins with a candle. Your good begins the very moment you turn within, even if you have no conscious awareness of presence. The simple act of yielding, "I can of my own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn," is already a shift of government. In proportion as we persist in that turning, day after day, in that proportion, the inner hush becomes natural, and the outer effects begin to show themselves. Fewer sharp edges, fewer compelled words, fewer fears with a microphone. What then do we do with intruding thought? We do not fight it. Fighting is faith in it. We do not chase it. Chasing is worship of it. We notice, we do not join, and we return, gently, immediately, as often as needed, to being and to listening. If thought shouts, let it shout into emptiness. You need not shout back. Rest again in I am, not as a phrase to repeat, but as the fact of being to which you yield. If dryness visits, receive dryness as you would receive rain, without complaint, without analysis. Sit, yield, listen. The discipline is not conquering thought. The discipline is consenting again. Please understand this crucial point. The absence of emotion is not the absence of presence. We are not seeking a sensation. We are consenting to government. Be still and know, not be thrilled and feel. The kingdom is within, whether you feel it or not. Feeling is weather. Presence is climate. If you measure your practice by sweetness, you will abandon it on gray days. Measure it instead by surrender. Did you return? Did you consent? If so, the word has room to govern, and that is enough. Here is a simple cue to help the return without turning the practice into mechanics. Let the breath mark your willingness. On the exhale, release personal will, quietly knowing, I can of my own self do nothing. On the inhale, receive, thy presence is my life. Do not repeat it aloud. Do not force rhythm. Let breath be a bell calling you back to listening. If you find yourself counting, striving, arranging, drop the cue and simply sit in readiness. The cue serves the presence. It never replaces it. And now, let this be your assurance. Stillness is not proved by a feeling. It is proved by your willingness to return, again and again, to the presence within. In proportion as you return, in that proportion do conflicts lose their urgency and fear its authority. We do not outthink noise. We outlast it by consent. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Dwelleth means to live, and to live is to return, 10 times, 100 times, until the returning becomes our native posture, and the day, without our management, bears the fruit of inner government. Let us take the next step and speak of identity. If we are merely workers, parents, partners, or the wounded, then every conversation will draft us into those roles, and we shall answer as effects. But hear the Master in the 15th chapter of John, "Abide in me, and I in you." That is not a verse to admire, it is a living instruction. Abide means to dwell, to live, to take up residence. Please let us be clear about that. This is not the occasional visit to a sacred feeling, not a Sunday mood, not a crisis prayer. It is residence, inner residence, in which our first fact is, I am. And every role becomes a mere assignment, never again a self. The picture is given, the vine and the branches. The branch has no independent life, no sap of its own. Its fruitfulness is not its project. It is the inevitability of its union. So with us. Harmony, wisdom, right words at the right time. These are not our achievements. They are the nature of the vine expressed through the branch that abides. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. To abide is to consent to that fact until it is our resting posture. Now hear the Apostle's diagnostic word, for it guards us from fantasy. Ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Romans 8:9. If so be. Only true as we abide. Only true if the Spirit dwells, lives within our conscious awareness as government. We are not children of God by announcement, but by indwelling. Reading about sonship is not sonship. Abiding is sonship realized. In proportion as we remain in that inner dwelling, in that proportion do we find our speech, our reactions, our very sense of self under a new law. The 3 minutes each morning are not an end. They begin a habit of returning. After the first conversation, slip back, 30 seconds, no performance, into the hush where identity is cause. At noon, before you answer the next message, let there be a breath's consent. Father, thy turn. In the mid-afternoon, when energy thins and irritations hunt, return. Quietly, inwardly, without display. Before a difficult meeting, do not rehearse the play. Re-enter the presence. These are not interruptions to life. They are life remembering its source. Each return is a reset from role to reality, from costume to consciousness. Then watch, not with curiosity, but with gratitude, the outward effects. Speech thins of desperation. The urge to win loosens. Manipulation loses its thrill. A quieter authority appears, not as force, but as the simple weight of what is true. You will find yourself saying less and meaning more, pausing longer and piercing deeper, answering what is asked and leaving untouched what fear demanded you defend. The room feels it before the ears hear it, because cause has changed. This, then, is our identity reset. Not a brighter self-image, not heroic discipline, not better performances of the old actor, but abiding until the Spirit's government becomes our natural state. In proportion as we dwell, in that proportion we are governed. In proportion as we are governed, in that proportion we are free. Abide in me, and I in you, and let the day and the words within it be the fruit of that union. Now let us bring this into the heat of conflict, because it is there that the old life most loudly insists on being our God. As human beings, we have been trained to meet conversation as survival. Prove your point, defend your name, correct the other, control the outcome. Please let us be clear about this. Even when our words are reasonable, if they are born of fear or the need to win, they carry the vibration of survival. And survival breeds survival. You know the pattern. One sharpness invites another. One careful case invites a counter case. One defensive tone multiplies sentences and divides hearts. We were not wicked. We were threatened. But threatened speech escalates, because like begets like. Now the new order. Speaking as an instrument, not an author, waiting for inner rightness, not crafting advantage. This often says less, but what it says is clothed with peace and carries power without force. The branch does not push sap, it abides and fruit appears. So in conversation, we abide and the word appears. Sometimes the right word is a question. Sometimes it is a brief acknowledgement. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a firm no without sting. The common element is that it comes after consent, not before it. Here is the simple practice inside the very moment. Before answering a provoking statement, take one interior breath. Not a show, not a performance. One breath in which you return. I can of my own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn. On that inhale, let I am be present. On that exhale, release the urgency to survive. That single inward bow changes cause, and in proportion as cause changes, in that proportion, the response changes of itself. Tone, timing, and even the choice of words. At work, a superior criticizes you unfairly. The old pattern mounts a case. Let me explain, edged with heat. The new pattern waits one breath. The peace that passes understanding comes forward as guard over heart and mind. Philippians 4:7. And you find yourself saying evenly, "Thank you for naming that. May I look into it and come back with specifics?" Or you may ask gently, "Would you clarify what success would look like to you?" No defense, no collapse, governed. At home, a loved one says, "You never listen." The old pattern corrects statistics. The new pattern bows inward and hears the ache beneath the charge. From stillness, you may say, "I hear that you feel unheard. I'm here now." Or, if a boundary is needed, "I want to hear you, and I can only do that if we both slow down." Same subject, different life in the words. In a store, a stranger is rude. The old pattern buys the ticket to their theater. The new pattern, one breath, stays free. You might step aside with a simple, "Go ahead." Or, if firmness is right, "I'm in line, thank you," without the poison of contempt. Online, where provocations multiply, the inward breath often. Please guard this. We are not using stillness to win an argument. We are consenting to be governed. Whatever outward form follows, silence, question, no, yes, is secondary. The peace of God does not make you passive, it makes you accurate. In proportion as our words stop coming from survival and begin coming from the stillness of I am, in that proportion, conflict either dissolves or reveals itself as unnecessary. And when conflict must be met, it is met by presence, not by the old armor. Then even disagreement has a different weather, and you will see that harmony is not the success of your strategy, but the fruit of the government you allowed within. Now a word about fear. Because fear is the silent director of more conversations than anger ever leads. Please let us be clear about this. Fear predicts. It writes tomorrow's script in the mind, then demands that you rehearse your lines today. It paints scenes, awkward meetings that go badly, bills that cannot be paid, lab results with dark meanings, rooms of strangers who will not receive you. And then it speaks to you from those imagined rooms as if they were fact. Under that spell, we live today under the government of a forecast, and we wonder why our speech shakes and our decisions taste of panic. The spiritual reversal is this. In stillness, we meet the day as presence, not as prediction. Take no thought for the morrow, the Master says, Matthew 6:34. He does not counsel irresponsibility, he counsels reality. Reality is I am, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, governing now. In our 3-minute consent, we quietly refuse to sign fear's contract with the future. We yield the mind's theater. We return to the sanctuary of being. We let today be met by God, not by our forecast of disaster. Here again the ancient promise that is also instruction. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Psalm 91:1. Dwelleth means to live, not to visit. To live is to take our address there, morning, noon, and whenever trembling begins. The shadow of the Almighty is not cast into tomorrow's guesses. It rests where we rest, in present awareness of God. When we dwell, fear loses jurisdiction, because fear can rule only in imagined time. Presence is now. Apply this to your ordinary scenes. There is an awkward conversation on the calendar. Fear writes 5 possible disasters and bids you armor up. Instead, 3 minutes. I can of mine own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn. You are not solving the meeting mentally. You are changing the basis of life. There is financial pressure. Fear demands frantic calculation, blame, and dread. Instead, 3 minutes. Turn within. Abide. Consent. Let wisdom announce itself before spreadsheets arrange themselves. There is a health concern. Fear rehearses symptoms and endings. Instead, 3 minutes. Not denial, not superstition. Dwelling. Let life be life within you, and then take the next right outer step from quiet, not from panic. There is social anxiety. Fear predicts rejection. Instead, one inward breath at the threshold, cause first, and you enter as a branch abiding in the vine, not as a beggar seeking approval. I will not overpromise you. The outer picture may not instantly change, but our government changes now. And in proportion as our government changes, in proportion as we truly dwell rather than predict, in that proportion the outer follows. Tone softens, timing becomes wise, provisions appear that anxiety could not manufacture. And even when the challenge remains for a season, it is met under a different law. The shadow of the Almighty does not remove the sun. It makes the heat bearable and direction clear. Therefore, let this be your practice. At daybreak, before you speak, dwell. At the threshold of dread, dwell. When the mind begins to show you the theater of tomorrow, smile inwardly and return. I can of my own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn. Do not argue with the pictures. Let them pass like clouds beyond the mountain of presence. Do not strain for faith. Abide, and faith is the air there. In time, and sometimes at once, you will discover that fear can still knock, but it cannot enter a house that is lived in. For the house is occupied. And when the house is occupied by I am, fear has lost its authority. Let us place a few guardrails around this way, because the mind loves to take a holy thing and turn it back into toil. The first misapplication is the drift into affirmation. I am calm. I am strong. I am successful. Please let us be clear about this. Repeating a phrase with mental force is not the same as consenting to presence. It is still the personal sense trying to brace the self. All power is in the word, but never the word that we project at the universe. The word that does the works is the impartation that comes to us within. If you notice yourself repeating I am like a hammer, stop. Return to recognition, not recitation. Be quiet enough that the fact of being announces itself without your help. The second misapplication is using stillness to influence a person. We slip into the chair, and without saying it, we begin, let my boss soften. Let my spouse see it my way. Let the child stop acting out. That is manipulation of effects. It is not our ministry. We are not here to change persons, places, or things. We are here to realize cause. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. In proportion as we consent to God as cause, in that proportion, persons and situations take their rightful shape. Sometimes by dissolving, sometimes by reappearing in new form, sometimes by leaving us uninterested. But the moment we try to aim stillness at a person, we have left God for effects. The third misapplication is spiritual ambition. We begin to measure our practice by visions, heat in the hands, sweet feelings, quick results. Reading about God has already trained us to crave fireworks. Now the mind wants to grade our silence. Please let us be clear about that too. Sensation is not authority. Be still and know is the direction. If there is a word within, receive it. If there is only hush, be just as satisfied. The kingdom is within, whether thunder is heard, or a whisper, or nothing at all. What then is the right aim? To be still enough to hear. To be receptive enough for the word within to announce itself. To be humble enough to let the Father do the works. Our stance is simple, and it is always the same. I can of my own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn. We sit not to make something happen, but to stop preventing what already is. Here is a self-test that will keep you honest. If you feel strained, you are working. If you feel surrendered, you are listening. Strain shows up as tightness in the jaw, holding of breath, urgency to get a result, inner speeches aimed at someone. Surrender shows up as soft shoulders, unhurried breath, willingness to let outcomes be added unto. Strain argues, surrender attends. Strain repeats, surrender receives. Our practice fails only when we turn it into mental effort. Its power is in surrender and listening. Keep the simplicity. 3 minutes. Withdraw, consent, abide. No projects in God. Let the Father speak first, and the day will prove what governs you. Cause within, effect without. Now let us speak of living this, not as an event, but as a rhythm. Unforced, simple, repeating without becoming a yoke. Please let us be clear about this. We are not adding weight to the day. We are removing self-government so that the government of God may be felt. A single 3-minute stillness begins the day, yes, but frequent short returns make abiding a lived reality.
Set 3 anchors.
First, before the first conversation of the day, whether with a loved one, a colleague, or the phone in your hand, 3 minutes. Withdraw, consent, abide. Let the Father speak first. Second, before the most difficult conversation or appointment, do not enter that room carried by yesterday's habits. Step aside. 3 minutes again, not to prepare your lines, but to yield your source. Third, at day's end, before the last word is spoken or the light goes out, 3 minutes. Return home within. This closes the circle. These 3 anchors alone will change the weather of a life. Between these anchors, let there be many returns. 20 seconds in the hallway before you dial. 20 seconds at the doorway before you knock. 20 seconds with the cursor hovering before you send. 20 seconds in the elevator when you cannot close your eyes but can open your heart. I can of my own self do nothing. Father within, thy turn. Do not make a ceremony, make a consent. The kingdom within is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Prove it by turning where you stand. Learn to do it in motion. Walking from the car to the building, let each step be a letting go of the role you are about to wear. Sitting in the car before you start the engine, 10 seconds to withdraw faith from the journey and place it within. Standing in a corridor while the meeting room is being set. 1 breath, 1 bow. It is not the posture that opens heaven. It is the surrender. Not the place, the presence. Pray without ceasing is not many words. It is persistent yielding. Now see the compounding effect, and let this encourage you. In proportion as you return often, in that proportion you do not fall all the way back into the old costume. Recovery becomes faster. You catch yourself mid-sentence and soften. You find the reply hovering, sharp, and it dissolves before it is born. You notice fear beginning to script the future, and it loses ink when you turn within. Each return shortens the distance between cause and effect, because cause is remembered sooner.
And so the fruits appear, not as fireworks, but as fewer regrets, fewer emotional spirals, more quiet right action.
Conversations end without the aftertaste of self-defense. Emails carry life rather than pressure. Meetings close with honesty that did not wound. In proportion as we practice this rhythm, in proportion as we let these short returns stitch the day together, in that proportion the day becomes governed, not by roles, not by forecasts, but by I am abiding. This is the secret of an unburdened life. Not more doing, but more consenting. Not longer prayers, but truer pauses. And a day that reveals, scene by scene, that government is within. Beloved, let us gather the thread we have been weaving and see it plain. We began with the outer life, assigning us our roles and dictating our words. We end with inner consent, establishing our government. We moved from talk about truth to tasting truth, from managing effects like anxious gardeners to realizing cause and watching the garden grow of itself. Please let us be clear about this. Anything in the external world is an effect. The presence and power of cause, of life, of wisdom, of love is within you, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. In proportion as we yield to that within, in that proportion, the day reveals harmony without.
Therefore, the charge is simple, and it is first.
Before we speak to a spouse, 3 minutes of stillness. Before we speak to a child, 3 minutes of stillness. Before we speak to a colleague, 3 minutes of stillness. Before we speak to anyone at all, 3 minutes of stillness. Withdraw faith from the scene. Return to I am. Say nothing outwardly. Inwardly consent. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Then let words be added unto, if they are given. Or let silence do the loving, if that is given. The branch does not plan fruit. It abides, and fruit appears. I invite you to make this an experiment today. Now, not tomorrow. Take the first conversation after this hour, and let I am speak first. Then watch, not only what others do, but what you do not do. Notice what you do not say. Notice what you do not defend. Notice what you do not rehearse afterward. Notice the temper that does not rise, the clever speech that never leaves the mouth, the apology that comes without shame, the boundary that comes without sting. These are fruits, and they appear in proportion as cause has changed within. Do not be troubled if you feel nothing. Your good begins the very moment you turn. Hearing about God and reading about God is far from experiencing God. Yet the instant you yield, Father, it is your turn. You have already moved from information to obedience, from self to spirit. The Word of God is not dependent on your personal capacity. All power is in the Word, and the Word is within you. Not your right thinking, not your firm jaw, not your mental energy. The impartation within does the works. Be still and know. So let the first word of the day be silence, and the second be whatever is given. Let morning open with dwelling, not with prediction. Let the thresholds of your meetings be altars of consent. Let night close with gratitude that you were carried. And if you forget, return. If you are noisy, return. If you are dry, return. In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. Now go, and let I am be first, and let the day be in effect. Let it show you, hour by hour, what government you have consented to. Cause within, harmony without. This is our way. This is our peace. This is our practice. Let the Father speak first.